Alright everyone, so I am recording this on a different video, webcam app than usual. I'm not sure why, but for some reason the one I normally use is acting really weird and it's not filming in the same resolution. So this is not perfect, but it is better than that. And so I apologize if the quality is a little bit off today, but it's the best I can do. Alright, so I obviously didn't do any training today, but I did get a lot of writing done, and that means that I am going to jump right into the question that I have for today. This is actually a client of mine. So Alika wants to know, he says, we have talked about this before, but is there a way to build muscle while limiting fat gain? I hear a lot about adding calories to build muscle. Are adding calories and adding protein the same thing when it comes to building muscle, or is it just a matter of language and terms? And then he says, maybe that's a question for your YouTube channel. And yes, the answer is it is. So that's a lot of different questions locked into one basic topic, so I will try and unpack them question by question. And, we'll see if I can give, a pretty solid answer to this whole thing, because it is a bit confusing. So, is there a way to build muscle while limiting fat gain? Yes. It's probably not the best way. So what happens is, when your body is in a calorie deficit, when your body is in a calorie surplus, that's typically the best time to build muscle. When you're gaining weight, you're always gaining both muscle and fat. Now, it's difficult to predict exactly what that number will be. So, it might be, 50-50, or it might be, like 75-25. You don't know ahead of time. And basically what you're looking to do is to optimize the amount of muscle that you're building relative to the amount of fat that you're building. That's, the way you do it. Now, is it possible to build muscle while you are staying at the same amount of, staying at the same body weight, staying at the same calorie intake? Absolutely. It happens, easiest in beginners. It happens in advanced athletes too. The only thing is, again, it's not quite as ideal. It can happen, absolutely, yes. Body recomposition is a thing, but it's just not quite ideal. Your body, all the hormones it's pumping out, it's much more prepared to gain weight and to gain muscle when you are, focused on adding weight. So, for example, if I stayed at, say, 200 pounds, not changing my weight at all, and I start off at 30% body fat, that means that I have about 60 pounds of body fat. And that means I have about 140 of lean mass. Now, if I stay at 200 pounds, and I go from 30% to 20% body composition, that is a huge jump. But I've only really put on about 20 pounds of muscle in the process. And then it gets harder and harder, because basically what that means is that you do have to keep getting leaner and leaner. And beyond about 15% or so, it's difficult to get leaner without losing weight. And so you might be, you might hit that point where at about basically 170 pounds of lean mass and 30 pounds of fat mass, you're finding it way harder to continue to build muscle while staying at 200 pounds, simply because there's much less fat to lose. You're struggling because your body, wants to keep that fat mass on to keep you alive. So, And of course, like I was saying, how when you're in a calorie surplus, everything is perfect for building muscle. You're putting on weight, so you're basically expanding the size of the pool, so it makes it easier and easier to build muscle, even if your body composition is going down. But at the same time, conversely, if you're in a calorie deficit, it's much harder to build muscle. That's not to say, again, that it's impossible. You can absolutely do it. It's just a much, less likely process. You have to take it really slow. You have to do a very, very, very limited cut. It is possible, but again, it's not ideal. So that's why the typical cycle that a lot of bodybuilders go through is that they will put on a ton of weight, 40, 50, 60 pounds, so they can put on a crap ton of muscle really quick. And then they're going to cut back down, and what they're going to do is they're going to try and use, basically maintain that muscle as much as possible while basically losing fat mass. So, is there a way to build muscle while limiting fat gain? Well, yeah, you can do it, again, like I said, by staying at the same weight and just, doing a recomposition. but it's a slower method, and it's not typically ideal. Now, of course, a lot of people, they want to look good. They don't want to put on a bunch of extra fat mass while they're putting on muscle. So that's not really something they want to do either. And they don't want to be bodybuilders. You can train like a bodybuilder. You can train for physique. You can train to build some muscle. But that doesn't mean that you have to be building the maximal amount of muscle possible so you can go into a bodybuilding competition. Most people are not, prepared for that. They're not trying to do that. So saying, that you should bulk up in order to put on muscle, for a lot of people is, it's bad advice. So yes, a lot of people will stick to sort of the recomposition, even though it's a slower process, even though, it's not ideal, simply because it, it's more in line with their goals. The next statement, I hear a lot about adding calories to build muscle. Yeah, like I said, when you're in a calorie surplus, you're gaining weight, you're gaining muscle, and you're gaining fat. And again, ideally, it's as much muscle as possible, as little fat as possible. But that's just the name of the game. Next question: are adding calories and adding protein the same thing when it comes to building muscle? No. Calories, protein does have protein is a form of calories, but it's not the same. So typically, you have your 3 macronutrients: your proteins, your fats, and your carbs. And of those 3, the most important when it comes to building muscle is protein. We know that. Having more protein increases muscle protein synthesis, makes it easier to build muscle. Now, you'll hear a lot of different numbers. People might say, you need 1 gram per pound of body weight, 2 grams per pound of body weight, even 2.5, 3 grams per pound of body weight. Those are ridiculous numbers. The science actually shows that it caps out at around 0.82 grams per pound of body weight per day. So for a 200-pound person, that means about 160 grams of protein. And that's a lot more than most people are getting in. It's a lot of protein. But it's not super unreasonable. It's not, you see these bodybuilders just chugging protein shakes left and right to get, 2 grams of protein a day or whatever, per pound of body weight per day or whatever. And that's absurd. You don't need that. So the thing is that after that 0.82 grams per pound of body weight per day, additional protein isn't bad for you. It's just not used, it's just not going to increase muscle protein synthesis anymore. And so it just basically, at that point, it's just calories. At that point, because protein tends to be a little bit more filling than fats and carbs, depending. A little more filling than carbs, at least. Maybe a little bit on par with fats. But since it tends to be a little bit more filling, it is, probably easier and cheaper not to just keep eating a crap ton more protein and just to focus on eating some other stuff instead. So that's about the amount of protein that you need to optimally build and maintain muscle. You may need a little bit more when you're in a cut. You may need a little bit more when you throw steroids into the equation. So the stereotypical 1 gram per pound of body weight per day is, that's a fine recommendation. It's maybe a little bit overkill, but it's safe. There's nothing wrong with that. So this ties back into, what I was saying previously. When you're looking to optimally build muscle, when you're looking to bulk up, you do need to be in some kind of calorie surplus. And assuming you're already getting your protein in, that can come from your carbs, that can come from your fats. So it's, it's not the same thing. You don't just need to eat more protein. But you could eat more protein, that's an option. You could also just eat more carbs and more fats. So yeah, basically, protein is important, but it doesn't need to be the be-all, end-all. It doesn't need to be all that you eat. It's not the only thing that matters when it comes to building muscle. When you are, again, optimizing, the amount of muscle that you're building by, training well, by recovering well, by, eating well enough, and, maybe you got some kind of chemical assistance, either supplements or steroids or whatever. Those are all things that maximize the amount of muscle that you can, build, again, that proportion of muscle to fat. But, again, for most people are not really doing a bulk, so they're not really, for them, it's, it's not about that so much as it is about recomposing, doing the recomposition thing while staying at roughly the same weight, which means basically just increasing your activity level, working out more, making sure that you're hitting that 0.82 grams per pound of body weight per day on protein, and, over time, it will happen. that's not to say that it's the fastest or best option. And I recommend when it comes to even just general exercises, even mini bulks and mini cuts are awesome. Just 10 pounds, back and forth or so. That helps you, again, experience sort of the bulk and cut cycle, and it helps you kind of, again, do things a little bit more optimally without having to do these massive, massive weight changes that you see bodybuilders do. So that is, kind of, one way to do things. But again, what most people do a lot of the time is just sit at the same weight and do a recomposition. And again, that's it's a good way to do things. It's a relatively convenient way to do things. It's also generally a slower way to do things, although, in some cases, people can recompose pretty astoundingly well. It happens. It's not like it never happens. It happens. It just is typically expected to be slower. So I hope that kind of covered the topic. It's kind of, again, a bit rambling. It's, probably a few loose threads in here. If anyone wants to know, a little bit more on the topic, don't hesitate to ask me some questions. But that is sort of the basic overview of the topic, and hopefully that helps. So as always, like, comment, share, tell me what you want to see in future videos, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.